Welcome to She Has a PhD, the podcast where we celebrate extraordinary women in science. I'm your host, Isabel Castanho, and I'm thrilled to be part of this empowering journey with you today. Today, we have the honor of exploring the life and work of a distinguished researcher and leader, educator, and advocate, Professor Rana Dajani. Rana Dajani is a professor of molecular cell biology at Hashemite University in Jordan, specializing in molecular biology, genetics and epigenetics, and stem cell research. With a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Jordan and a master's and PhD in molecular biology from the University of Iowa, Professor Dajani's professional journey has been marked by outstanding achievements. Her research has focused on unraveling mysteries in molecular biology, particularly in understanding the mechanisms underlying genetic diseases and exploring the potential of stem cells for therapeutic applications. In addition to her significant contributions in these fields, she has also been actively engaged in cutting-edge mental health research, delving into the study of epigenetics in stress, trauma, and resilience. Beyond her scientific accomplishments, Professor Rana Dajani has become an influential advocate for science education and women's empowerment. Recognizing the importance of science education, especially for girls and minority communities, she has been actively involved in initiatives that promote access and inclusion in the scientific field. Her tireless efforts for breaking down gender barriers and inspire young women have gained widespread recognition, including multiple awards, interviews on various platforms, articles from Forbes to Nature. She has been named one of the most influential women scientists in the Islamic world and one of the world's 100 most powerful Arab women. I was immediately fascinated when I first came across Professor Dajani. In an interview earlier this year, I heard her say one of my favorite quotes of all time that I use myself frequently: "Be the change you want to see in the world." I am thrilled to dive into her inspiring journey today. So let's start by getting to know Professor Rana Dajani better. Could you please briefly tell us some more about yourself and how you often define yourself as wearing 5 scarves?
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this conversation. And I'm excited to learn as well as share as we explore the different aspects of this journey. When I introduce myself, I like to say, first of all, that I'm half Palestinian. My father's from Jerusalem, and I'm half Syrian. My mother's from Aleppo, but I'm Jordanian. And so I represent the diversity of people living in the Levant area and how much we're all connected. And it's only colonialism that created these artificial barriers amongst us. And this is just a testimonial to our humanity as the whole Homo sapiens. But in terms of my career and what I do in my life, I like to say that I play 5 roles. And people, when they talk about roles, they talk about their different hats. I don't wear a hat, I wear a scarf. So I talk about my 5 scarves. And the first one, and the one that I'm most proud of, is that I'm a mother. I have 4 children, and to me that's the most important role I or any person can play in contributing to the future generations, to have a healthy future generation of human beings who are responsible and who can make a difference and are healthy. The second scarf is that I'm a teacher. Educator. I was a school teacher for 10 years. The second most important role is being a teacher, because teachers are the ones that form, the mindset of children growing up. Because children, if they're not at home, they're at school. And so the teacher is the second most important person in contributing to the next generation. The third scarf is I'm a scientist, as when you introduced me. And I get a kick and a thrill of trying to understand how cells communicate, how proteins connect. It's just amazing. I'm in awe all the time. And I'm sure scientists like me can understand what does this mean. And my fourth scarf is that I'm a social entrepreneur. I founded a program called We Love Reading, which is about changing mindsets through reading to nurture change makers. And the program started in Jordan and is now in 65 countries around the world. My fifth scarf Usually I tell people, I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I invite you to read my book where I wrote about those 5 scarves. But for the sake of Isabel, I'm going to tell you. So the 5th one is about defending and fighting for human rights, especially those who are oppressed and vulnerable. And most importantly, those are women, because they're half the population and they are still oppressed. So I discuss my theory, my hypothesis on why this is happening. And as always, as scientists, we don't just identify problems, we come up with solutions. So I also propose a whole new framework of how we can readjust or create a paradigm shift to make the world a better place for all human beings.
Thank you. And I can say that I've read the book and I loved it. I couldn't stop. I am definitely going to read it a second time. Thank you so much for that introduction. And we'll go deep into so many of the things that you already mentioned. But before we go there, as the name of our podcast suggests, you have a PhD. What led you to pursue a PhD?
So growing up, we didn't have a TV at home. And we spent all our time reading anything we could get our hands on, right? So reading books and novels, but then also reading journals and magazines, because my father was a physician and scientist. So we had subscriptions, not just to the academic journals, but also to the science journals for the public. So we had National Geographic, Scientific American, and we would read those and, voraciously, and then have discussions every evening with my father about what does this mean and how come, and there was no red tape. Every question was encouraged. And this is also part of my upbringing and my culture as a Muslim, that in Islam we're encouraged to ask questions and to be curious and to use our minds, and not to let them go to waste. So that led me to want to be a pioneer. Right? I want to be a discoverer. I wanted to go to the moon. I wanted to, go down in the deep trenches of the ocean or the highest mountain. But I couldn't do that. And so I think I channeled all that energy or all that passion of wanting to be a pioneer to be a scientist, because a scientist is a pioneer. You're breaking new ground. You're discovering things, but inside a cell, inside a molecule, and trying to understand that. And I think that love of exploration, that awe with science is why I wanted to become a scientist. But in addition, I also wanted to help humanity. Right? I have this caring upbringing as well, which sometimes comes from my mother's side. So my mother was all about, we were 8 girls and 1 boy. And so we were all about helping the community around us, taking care of the children in our neighborhood. And also I draw that from my religion. It's about taking care of every neighbor. It's about not belittling any good deed. And it's that feeling of responsibility that led me that I also want to help humans. And if I can discover how biology works, then I can understand when biology does not work. And that means people have disease. And so if I can uncover the reasons for disease, I can help humanity. And therefore, I can be that person that I want to be.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm a scientist too, so I resonated with a lot of what you said. And you mentioned before, I feel it's this feeling of being eager to understand the unknown. I think that's what makes us scientists go and after even the challenges of, because not trying to understand the unknown is quite difficult, but it's so exciting at the same time, being the first to try and understand why things happen, how they happen. That's fascinating. Thank you so much. Now touching on something else that you also touched on when you introduced yourself, regarding your 5 scarves, was being a teacher. So you did start as a teacher, and then you decided to become a researcher. There's so many things that may be in parallel with being a teacher and being a researcher, as you mentioned. So that's very interesting. And your earlier research included studies of microbiology, for example, bacterial infection, immunology. But then, besides this shift from teacher to researcher, even in research, you shifted into population genetics and more recently epigenetics of trauma and resilience. What made you choose these quite diverse areas of work, and how did you pivot around these fields, including during and after your PhD?
All right, that's a complicated question. So let me unpack it. First of all, I wanted to be a scientist, right? Even when I was a child. But in Jordan, I did my bachelor's and master's in biology, and there were no PhD programs. So, and I sent I corresponded with universities around the world. I got accepted at the Cambridge University in England, but I didn't have the financial resources to go. So I had to put that dream of being a scientist on hold. And I think there's a lesson that you don't give up. You just put it on hold. Life is long. The right time will come. And so usually when people do science in Jordan, you end up being a teacher. And I love teaching. And I think I inherited this from my father, from those every evening sitting and just discussing. I love learning and sharing, and I think that's the fundamental part of teaching. Helping children foster those critical thinking skills, and then seeing that light bulb go on in their eyes once they realize it. So I have a passion for that. And actually, this is something maybe just a side story. I became a lecturer at the university first in Jordan. And then I chose to resign and become a teacher on purpose because I thought if I wanted to change mindsets of children to be critical thinkers, it's too late at the university level. I have to go when they are young, when they're in elementary school. And everybody said, you're crazy. You're giving up a job as a lecturer at a university to go teach in a school. I said, yes. That is my passion. I want to make a difference. And so that's when I engaged in teaching, and I made it the best experience ever because that's how I tackle things. I follow my passion, and even if I don't exactly am able because of the circumstances to follow my passion, I make what I'm doing fun, entertaining, and interesting so that I enjoy it. I can't do something I don't enjoy. I play all day. So even if it's not my passion, I make it into something that's attractive to me. And so that was my career being a teacher. And by the way, I'm still a teacher at the university now. So teaching never ends, right? And it's always fun because I always come up with different approaches and pedagogies to my students. So I always have a fun time teaching. I am never bored. And people also who don't understand the joy of teaching look at me and say, what? You enjoy it? Oh yeah, I thrive on it. It's like I can't get back and again and do that. So I love teaching. So that's unpacking that part. But then my PhD was in innate immunology. And we had knockout mice. We worked on xenografts and we did viruses. So very sophisticated techniques and tools. But when I came back to Jordan, there was not enough funding to actually maintain a lab. Maybe I could get a bunch of funding for a one time, but there's not enough money to keep it going. And research takes years. We know that. So I had to be resourceful and I had to be smart. And that's when I realized that a PhD is only a leg of the journey. It only gives you tools and a way of thinking and skills so that you can then embark on your own journey of discovery and find the field that where you can thrive. And that's when I said, okay, I'm not going to be able to do all the stuff I did in the US. And so I took a whole year just reading the literature, keeping up with science, and making observations around me to try to see what is that question that I can ask and answer within my circumstances in Jordan that will still be a major contribution to science on an international global level. Because I wanted to do quality. I wanted to contribute to science. I didn't want to do anything that was mediocre, right? Because I was in this because I loved it. I went and did my PhD when I was 30 years old with 4 kids. So this is not for fame. This is not for money. This is for the pure passion. And so I took my time. And at that time, the HapMap project had just came out, right? Identifying the differences between different groups of humans around the world and celebrating that diversity. And that was on the cover of Science, I remember, the diversity of human beings. And that's when suddenly the light bulb went off in my brain when I realized that in Jordan, I live in a community of 2 ethnic minorities who had fled from southern Russia and the Caucasus Mountains because of persecution for their religion, the Circassians and the Chechens. And nobody had studied them anywhere in the world. So this was my treasure. This was my golden bullet, so to speak, that I could be the one to study them and be the first one to become a world expert on these 2 populations. And that's what happened. So I asked the right question. And that question is still giving, by the way. Every day there's a new research topic, there's a new question to understand within these 2 populations. And in today's world, because of the Eurocentric bias of all the genome data that are in the databases, this becomes very valuable so that we can really understand mechanisms of disease. and contribute to finding solutions in that sense. And so that's why I shifted to population genetics. And I had to catch up, right? I had to read all about it, understand it. But again, you have the skills, you have the mindset. Why not? And then again, that curiosity, right? You're still looking around, because you know what is the hallmark of being a scientist? As one famous physicist said, a scientist is someone who sees what everybody sees, but thinks what no one has thought. And I think that's not just scientists. I think that's all human beings, right? And that's how we survive as a species. So it was me like looking all the time, looking and observing, being curious. And again, I draw it from my religion. My religion is all about, you got to ask questions. You have to be curious. You got to keep looking. And so I thought, that's when I noticed the huge waves of refugees who were coming into Jordan. I'm this daughter of refugees, right? And Jordan has always been a haven. The Palestinians, the Iraqi, the Syrian, the Yemeni, even the Ukraine. We have them. So to me, it was like, oh, wait a minute. So what is the impact of this trauma on the DNA of these kids or these women or these men? And if we can understand that impact, can we help reverse that epigenetic signature of trauma? And then not just that, can we also look at a human being with dignity and holistically, and identify not just the negative impact of trauma, but also the positive impact of trauma. So those were two new angles of trying to understand epigenetics, its impact, how to reverse it, and can we frame it in a positive way? So, and then what's next? I don't know. I can't wait. I keep observing, saying, what's the next question? And I have a lot of questions that I write down for the right time for me to actually pursue them.
Wow, that's incredible. That's also an example of adaptability, how flexible you were into changing, swapping from, okay, I can't do this right now. I can just take my skills and do this that I also find fascinating and very important. That's a fantastic story. I was curious when I saw that you've been involved in conversations around ethics of gene editing. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that's another story. So in the Circassian and Chechen research, we discovered a novel gene risk factor for diabetes. Mm-hmm. But that gene was not identified, didn't have a function. You know, it's one of those genes that are sequenced, but nobody knows a function. So in order to understand and study the function, we actually took cells from patients where we identified that novel gene risk factor, and we wanted to from their blood, and we wanted to change them back through induced pluripotent stem cells to stem cells, and then to differentiate them into pancreatic beta cells to understand what is the function of that gene in the development of or progression of diabetes. Now, in order to do that, that means you have to do stem cell research. That means you have to work with stem cells. And the time we did it, iPSC were not discovered yet. So we had to work with human embryonic stem cells. And that's when I thought, wait a minute, as a Muslim, with my ethical values, is it okay for me to work with human embryonic stem cells? And I didn't find an answer because there was no consensus. There was nothing out there that really I felt was satisfying to me. And so, you be the change you want to see in the world, like you said. So I thought, okay, we need to tackle this. And if nobody's done it, then I've got to do this. And of course, I'm always a team player. I believe in teams. I believe in bringing in experts from every field and working together, sharing opinions, and having interdisciplinary experts. And so I created a team from not just scientists, but also physicians, bioethical law, theologians, because ethics is steeped in religion, whether we agree or disagree. Nothing, society is not in a vacuum. And we need to respect that and take it into consideration. And so along with others, of course, this is not alone. In the end, it was a collective effort. And we actually passed the first stem cell law in Jordan that became a precedent for other countries in the region and even in the Islamic world. And it governed how to do stem cell research and stem cell therapy, of course. But that kind of propelled me into the ethics world. Because, you have to understand all of those things. And then, so ethics does not stop with stem cells. It extends to everything where the applications of biology, in society has implications in their, ethical value. And that's where I went to gene editing, CRISPR, what's right, what's wrong. And I became an advocate also because there were very few Muslims, scientists at the table to discuss the ethics of Muslim scientists. And that's important, not only because Muslim scientists want to do research, but we also have Muslim patients who are going to, receive those applications and therapy that are based on stem cells and gene editing. And they want to know if they can, receive that kind of therapy or not. So we owe it to them. And this is not just within the Islamic world, but, there are Muslims in every country all over the world. So they have a right for someone to represent them and discuss and understand what are the ethical frameworks for research and therapy. And it's been a fantastic journey, by the way. I've learned so much. Again, it's always exciting. You're learning something new. And I think it's that the courage and the beckoning of the unknown, as you said, is irresistible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining that. You do mention your religion a lot, and that actually goes to my next question. I was actually fascinated and intrigued when I saw that you defend the biological evolution theory while not just respecting your religion, but actually integrating the two. So from your TEDx talk to your article in Nature on the topic, you are actually stimulating a really interesting and important conversation, in my opinion, anyway. I particularly resonated when I heard you highlight the importance of encouraging students to challenge ideas and stimulate scientists who are free thinkers, which you already have mentioned earlier in our podcast today. And why the reason I found it so fascinating and intriguing was that because for many, accepting scientific evidence means denying the existence of God. But that's not the case with you. And as a woman of science, but also faith, how do you find this balance between these two worlds, and how do you help others find it too?
That's a very important question, because we all have our frameworks and which frame our values, and those are very important to conduct a healthy human life with our fellow humans around us. So I draw my inspiration from my religion as a Muslim, so I can only speak for Islam as representing me. And to me, Islam actually calls us to use our minds and brains and to ask questions. And actually, the scientific method as we know it today, it came from Islam. And the testimony for that is the golden era, or during the Middle Ages, when all the discoveries in medicine and physics and astronomy and chemistry were happening within the Islamic world, because the framework was be curious, ask questions, observe, and if you don't get it right, keep doing it again and again and again. So when religion is asking you to be a scientist, right, then there's no conflict. And at all. And I think in other religions, there was a conflict because that particular religion did not ask people to use their minds and think. There was some kind of oppression. And so you had to get rid of the religion so that you could ask questions and use your mind. We didn't have that problem. So that's why I'm able to thrive and flourish and be a scientist while maintaining my identity as a Muslim. But also you pointed to something else about the existence of God. Many and all scientific theories and let's say even hypotheses and observations are actually trying to understand nature around us. That's what we do, right? We observe a phenomenon and we try to explain it. And usually that has nothing to do whether there's a God or not, right? The question of whether there's a God or not is more is a more, let's say, personal, spiritual thing, and has nothing to do with your research, because we're studying nature. Now, how did it all start? Nobody scientifically has been able to answer that question. And some people tell you it started by itself. Some people tell you it was Allah, for me as a Muslim. Some people will tell you it was God. Somebody will tell you something else. But that has nothing to do with trying to understand the laws and the mechanisms that were put down by whoever that entity was to govern nature. Right? So it has nothing to do with that. And I think sometimes that misunderstanding is what stands in the way as a barrier of going forward, enjoying being a scientist while having your values and ethics. And maybe the last thing I'll say is I see that the role of religion is to help us understand how we apply the scientific discoveries within human society to ensure the dignity and equality and fairness to all. And to me, so that it gives us the ethical framework to apply those scientific discoveries.
Wow, well said. I really like that. That last sentence you said is, yeah, that's fantastic. It's actually incredible to hear how your early passion for science evolved in such a fulfilling and diverse career. Now, a quick question on women leaders. Throughout your career, were there any women leaders who played a significant role in shaping your journey?
I always am asked that question. And to me, actually, I think every woman I have encountered has been an inspiration for me, regardless where she comes from, regardless of her education background. I learn from everybody, and I have learned from you, Isabel. So thank you very much. So you're all my role models, and you are all my inspiration.
Thank you. But it's very interesting because it's quite interesting when I've had situations where I had students that look up to me or ask me advice or sort of see me as a mentor. And it's quite interesting to also feel the same way with those students. They inspire me too. So I completely understand that. Thank you. Yeah, there's incredible women everywhere. On this topic of women, in your opinion, what are some effective strategies to encourage and support young girls, but also adult women of all types, including moms, which you mentioned earlier? But what are effective strategies to encourage and support them in pursuing and thriving in careers in STEM fields? How can we ensure that both the younger generation, those who may have taken different career paths earlier in life, feel empowered to embrace opportunities in science and find the support they need to succeed?
Again, that's a very important question, and it's complicated. It's not easy, right? Because it's changing a lot of things in society. So maybe I'll give some pointers, right? I think, first of all, we need more role models. And we need more role models who look like us, who speak like us, who dress like us, so we can identify with them. And unfortunately, the role models are few, and usually they represent one particular part of the world, and that's not helpful, right? And that's why your podcast is very, very important because you're highlighting women from all over the world, from different backgrounds, so every young woman can see herself in that person. And not just young women, you also need the young men to start seeing these role models, to get used to them, and to acknowledge them and see them in their own sisters, wives, daughters, and mothers. So role models are very, very important, and we cannot have enough of them. And this is also a call that you don't have to be extra special to become a role model, right? You just be yourself, and you are special just by being yourself. And that leads to the second thing, which is reading, right? Reading and writing. In order to have a role model, you need somebody to write her story. And that's why I encourage everyone to write their story and not to say, who am I? I'm just a simple person. I have nothing special. No, you're very special. So write your story. We need to hear it. And actually, you owe it to future generations. And not just that. If you don't write your story, somebody else will. And we won't know what they're going to write about, right? So it's better for you to do it. But then it's reading, right? We need to encourage reading because the more we read, the more we learn about other parts of the world. The more we have critical thinking skills by reading, especially reading novels. Oh my God, that is so important for widening the imagination, building vocabulary to express yourself. And all those are qualities, right? Critical thinking, expressing yourself, and then becoming the hero you read about. All those are qualities that will help a young girl dream beyond her own community, beyond her own neighborhood, and to see herself in someone else. And that's why reading is very, very important as well. And maybe the third one is mentoring. Finding someone that you can share and talk with, a safe space, somebody who'll just listen to you. They don't have to tell you what to do, but they can listen. They can share their own story, right? And it's not about just mentoring professionally. It's also mentoring personally, how to deal with your everyday life, because they're all intertwined together. And I think we need more of that mentoring, that peer-to-peer connection and communication, so that we can all boost each other, help each other, and encourage each other to pursue our dreams, whatever they are. Because you asked about, what about I want to change my career, and so on. And we need to have that courage and that confidence to say, you know what, I've been doing this for a while, and I want to do something else now. And to be able to do that.
Yeah, I would actually like to delve a bit deeper into mentorship and its significance in your journey. Has mentorship played a pivotal role in shaping your career path? And if so, in what ways has it influenced your trajectory? And now, because I like to overcomplicate questions, looking not only shaping your career now, looking from the perspective of a leader, how are you actively fostering mentorship and supporting the growth of aspiring scientists?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person who sees a challenge and thinks up of a solution. Like I can't sit, right? And I start thinking creatively, what can we do? And when I start thinking that way, I also think of sustainable solutions. I don't think of band-aids and quick fixes. I don't believe in that. I think if I have to come up with something, it has to be holistic. And that's when I came up actually with a whole program for mentoring for female scientists. I realized that me at the university, I didn't have time to talk to other colleagues, to share my ideas, to get encouragement or critique for that matter. And so I thought, okay, can I come up with something? And I came up with a model and I called it 3 circles of alimat. And the word alimat is an Arabic word, which means female scientists, just to speak to the history that there's a word for female scientists in our history. And the 3 circles represented, the first circle was Jordan, the second, the Arab world, and the third was globally. And what this mentoring program was, it was about peer-to-peer. So basically for personal and professional mentoring, but in a way where we would pair 2 female scientists together, kind of like a speed dating, and then we would let them go. Right? Because, there's research that says if within the first 3 minutes you don't click, you're not going to click later. So those who click, and then we let them go. They choose the way they want to communicate, whether online or in person, but there's no pressure on either side. And it's not about like, I'm going to give you a grant or help you publish a paper. No, this is more personal, weaved in with the professional. And sometimes the one who is mentoring doesn't necessarily have to be senior. It could be somebody junior, but has something that the other doesn't have. And that also fosters that feeling of everybody has something to give and we all need something from someone else. So there's no hierarchy. So all my programs are about no hierarchy. We all are unique and we have something to give to the world. And of course, as a scientist, I did research on the program. We published 2 papers on the impact of the program and why it worked. And we won an award, from the National Academy of Sciences in the US. And now the program actually went further to help women, not just in science, in business and in law, and actually not just women, also men, because they need that kind of mentoring as well.
Yeah, thank you. I heard about and I read about your mentoring program, and that's fascinating. So that's a great way you're helping with mentoring the future young scientists, and not only that, like you mentioned, also the other way around. So that's fascinating. Okay, so I could stay here for hours. I'm really enjoying this conversation, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. And I would like to finish with 3 lightning questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. First lightning question. What's the most memorable moment in your career so far?
So, I mean, there are many, but I'm going to choose them one. The most memorable memory of my career is when we discovered that novel gene risk factor for diabetes in the Circassian and the Chechen population. Because to me, it was a dream. I believed, sometimes scientists, you get this gut feeling. I believed that we were going to find something unique in those 2 populations, although I had no previous evidence, and it took years. And then when we discovered it, I was over the moon. And it just it just made me believe in myself. And this is for everyone, that if you believe in your gut feeling, just go for it. Because it's true. It's right. It doesn't come from nowhere. There's a reason you have that gut feeling. And I felt, and I'm sure every scientist has that moment where their gut feeling comes through and they know it was right and they did it. And to me, that was that moment.
Wow. I wish I was a fly in that room. Lightning question 2. If you could give one piece of advice to aspiring female scientists, what would it be?
Remember, your DNA is unique. Nobody has your DNA that ever lived in the past, that lives today, that will live in the future. And so you have something unique to give to the world. The world needs you. And so have the courage and the confidence and go out there and dream big, because if you can dream it, nothing is impossible.
I like that. And now for our final lightning question. Is there a remarkable woman leader in science you admire and think the world should know more about?
There's so many. right? I mean, there's so many I know. We could make a whole list. But maybe if I were to choose one, my friend is a chemist. She's a professor of chemistry. She's amazing. She makes project after project. Her name is Abir al-Bawab. And she had cancer, a very rare kind of liver cancer. Yet, she persevered, she thrived, and she became an advocate for that kind of cancer and still doing research and coming up with new ideas. Every day she sends me on WhatsApp, what do you think about this, Rana? So she is one remarkable woman scientist.
Wow, thank you. I will make sure to check her out. Thank you, Dr. Dajani, for sharing your story and experiences, for introducing us to an inspiring women leader, you. It has been an honor to have you on She Has a PhD.
Thank you. I'm honored.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to She Has a PhD. Please consider subscribing to our podcast. We'll be back soon with more incredible stories of women breaking barriers in science. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and never forget that you have the power to make an impact on the world. Okay, that was long episode.
Wow. Good. We did well. Thank you.